Crushed, blown up, obliterated, eaten alive, consumed by the depths of the sea, dragged into the darkness by nightmares, banished to the spirit realm. Just some of the magical fates DreamWorks Animation has brought to us. Today we're ranking every single DreamWorks Animation villain fate from least gruesome to most gruesome. Our last, or technically first place pick for the least gruesome DreamWorks fate has to be Eris from Sinbad, Legend of the Seven Seas. With some villains, it often feels like they got away with their crimes. Like, they committed genuine acts of terrorism and got hit with the equivalent of a slap on the wrist in return. Eris is a different case, however, because in her case, that's basically exactly what happened.
And lucky for you, I've got places to go, things to destroy, stuff to steal.
I guess it wouldn't be too easy to punish a goddess of chaos, but there's something morbidly funny about seeing a character pretty much blatantly admit that she's learned absolutely nothing, that she's going to continue committing the exact same crimes she committed throughout the movie, more in the future, and still facing absolutely no retribution for it.
Well, Peter, I guess you learned a pretty valuable lesson.
Nope. Barely behind in our next spot is Chunky from The Croods. The attempted murderer to pet pipeline is a crucial part of the DreamWorks lore, and Chunky is a perfect example of this. When the third act conflict forces him and Grug to work together in order to avoid extinction, they end up going from enemies to friends in record time. Since he gained new companions through his misdeeds, you could almost say that Chunky got an even better ending than Eris, but we're gonna put him lower than her on the sole basis that he actually deserved his scot-free ending, whereas Eris really didn't. On a similar note is Queen Barb from Trolls World Tour. Queen Barb got a pretty merciful redemption given how she literally tried to take over the entire world with music. Her vision was basically a worldwide cultural assimilation. In other words, she wanted to unite the world forcibly under a love of rock music.
I will unite the trolls under one music. Our music!
This is definitely one of the more ambitious schemes from a DreamWorks film, so it says a lot that she basically got off with a slap on the wrist, changing for the better after the film, and even becoming friends with Poppy and the other trolls. The whole power of friendship tone fits well with the Trolls universe, but Barb's still got dealt an easy hand. Rounding out the bottom category is Don Lino from the infamous Shark Tale. Love it or hate it, I think there's one thing everyone can agree on when it comes to Shark Tale. Don Lino is not that bad of a guy. I mean, sure, he's a widely feared mob boss who eats weaker sea creatures.
I want to know everything about him. I want to know where he lives. I want to know where he sleeps. He pops a gill. I want to know about it. Who is the Shark Slayer?
Okay, look, I said he's not that bad. If nothing else, he does genuinely love his family.
I don't know how else to say this to you, Lenny. You see something, you kill it, you eat it. Period. Thanks.
Even if he looks down on Lenny for being a vegetarian, the ending of the movie sees him apologize to his son, accepting him for who he is. The worst thing that happened to him was getting beaten up indirectly by the car wash, and also having his face nibbled for a few minutes by some vengeful shrimp. The only reason Don Lino's even this low is that while it wasn't part of a punishment per se, he did have to face the loss of his beloved son Frankie, but in the end he made a lot of friends and learned a valuable lesson. Honestly, you could argue he had a better arc than Oscar, but I guess that's a discussion for another day. For now, let's move on to the characters who at least kinda paid for their misdeeds. These are the villains who got technically punished. First up in this category is former Captain Smek from Home. The Boov are known as an alien race who specialize in running away from their problems.
Genius! They will never find us here. Thank you!
God, that's a mood. And as obnoxious as he is, so is Captain Smek, their once beloved leader. Or rather, their still beloved former leader. Sure, Smek got dethroned by Kyle when he was outed as a coward, unwilling to face the people's problems, which is admittedly weird since he was super open about being said coward, but whatever. But at the end of the movie, he's shown partying on the moon with the other Boov. It was initially hard for him to accept no longer being a captain, but he's still beloved enough to throw a party on the moon with a pretty big group of his people. So in the end, I guess he learned his lesson, or at least learned how to DJ.
Yes! I love it!
Good for him either way. Up next is Guy Gagné from Turbo. Gagné is basically a less successful Chick Hicks. He was a once beloved racer and the idol of Turbo, that is, before he revealed that he'd go to any lengths to crush his competition. He was capable of endangering the lives of not just Turbo, but the other more human racers just to ensure that he wouldn't have to be known as the guy who lost to a snail at the Indy 500. In the end, he was both known as the guy who lost to a snail at the Indy 500 and the guy who got banned from racing and presumably arrested for all the damage he caused. Professor Poopy Pants from Captain Underpants is up next. Okay, so did nobody tell this guy about name changes?
Not exactly.
Like, I'm sorry to break my suspension of disbelief so soon, but come on, the guy's smart enough to invent a machine that can literally delete a child's ability to laugh, rich enough to actually build it, and he didn't once think to change his name until George and Harold suggested it to him. It's actually really funny. This guy should be a comedian.
Sir, are you saying your full name is Pee-Pee Diarrheastein Poopy Pants Esquire?
That is, if he ever grows back to normal size after being shrunken down to a tiny enough size to ride a bee. It's certainly an adjustment, but I have a feeling he'll find some kind of invention that's capable of fixing his woes.
Back in business, baby.
Either way, he lobotomized children and didn't get a life sentence for it, which, any way you slice it, is a pretty easy fate for him to accept. Next is the youngest villain on our list, Francis E. Francis. Fittingly, the man who tried to capitalize on society's love of all things cute was punished by being turned into something cute himself, a helpless little baby. Okay, maybe not little, but definitely helpless. On one hand, sure, it must be hard to accept that you're gonna have to be raised from infancy all over again. On the other hand, well, babies are known for getting literally everything they want handed to them. Whether he still has the mind of his adult self or not, that's a pretty sweet deal. And if Eugene sticks to his word, hopefully Francis will be a better grown-up once they finish re-raising him. Rounding out this category are the Sasa from Madagascar. These guys aren't the most evil villains on our list by any means, but in the context of their movie, they're definitely some of the scariest. The Sasa have been tormenting lemurs for ages, to the point where the mere mention of them sends the whole clan into a panic. Thankfully, when Alex overcomes his predator instincts and uses his strengths to intimidate them, the Sasa are forced to run away and never hunt lemurs again. It might sound like a pretty easy deal, but think about it. The Sasa are going to have to try and find an entirely new source of food now that the lemurs are off limits. What's worse is that they now have something hunting them, or at least someone they think is hunting them. It's good that they'll be kept in check, but it won't be an easy adjustment for the poor guys. That said, it'll be easier than for anyone else down the line. These are the non-lethal fates. They might not be dead, but they still got some pretty substantial punishment. First and foremost, we can't go without mentioning the most tragic villain in DreamWorks history, Ken from B-Movie. Look, I get it. The guy has a bit of a temper and isn't the most pleasant dude to be around, but like, come on. The guy's allergic to bees, so he tries to kill a bee that made it into his house.
Well. A royal flush.
To a normal person, that sounds completely rational. To Vanessa, it's an absolute deal breaker.
Are there other bugs in your life?
No, but there are other things bugging me in life.
This man not only lost his girlfriend to a literal bee, he has to live with the fact that they have a freaking law firm together. That's a level of disrespect I didn't even know existed, all going to a guy who did nothing to deserve it. Justice for Ken.
Oh, that bee is living my life.
Let it go, Kenny.
When will this nightmare end?
Swimming into the next spot is Chelsea Van der Zee, a local teenage mermaid who's totally not an ageless war criminal trying to get revenge on Ruby's mother. Normally, for a sea monster, a fate of being caged by a guy who's devoted seemingly decades to catching a creatures like you would be a fate worse than death, but Ruby doesn't seem to mind. She survived getting hit by 3 Kraken lasers with nothing but the trident to block her, seeing as how she seems to have sustained 0 injuries, and if that weren't merciful enough, she's absolutely eating up the attention of being live streamed with Captain Lighthouse.
I'm not evil. I'm just pretty and misunderstood.
She definitely could have gotten a way worse ending, but honestly, something about this just seems right. Taking home a similar fate is the former pop star duo of Velvet and Veneer. This dastardly duo from Trolls band together had a pretty messed up plan. Lacking anything adjacent to musical talent themselves, they took trolls captive and sucked the life, i.e. talent, out of them to enhance their performances. Being guilty of terrorism, kidnapping, and torture, they've definitely more than earned that prison sentence they got in the end.
Fair enough. Prison it is!
But honestly, mad respect to Veneer for having the guts to publicly admit his crimes and accept his punishment. Finally, a celebrity who can take some accountability. One of the slightly more ambiguous fates, that of Makunga, is next. In case you forgot about this Alec Baldwin persona, Makunga is the main villain of Madagascar 2, scheming to become the alpha of Zuba's pride.
But after I defeat you and take over as Alpha Lion, you'll have so much more time to spend with your pathetic excuse of a son.
He also plotted to get the pair straight up killed to decomplicate things a bit, which led ultimately to a well-deserved beating from Nana, who called this self-proclaimed alpha what he really is, a bad kitty. The last we see of Makunga is him being pulled away by his ear, and apparently the DVD commentary for Madagascar 2 reveals that he was taken back to New York in a cage by Nana. Whether this is as a pet, or a donation to the zoo, or some other third thing is anyone's guess, but whether or not that one guy in the Reddit comment section who suggested she might have eaten him is correct, I'll just go off of what we know and keep him relatively low as a result. Clay-figured gold digger Victor is up next. This pretentious, putty person wants to marry Lady Tottington in order to get a share of her massive estate.
What ho! For you, my love.
This results in him attempting to murder Wallace, who Tottington actually likes, and that results in a whole slew of consequences.
Get your hairy mitts off my future wife, you big brute.
He gets sprayed in the face by pansy spray, how subtle, and knocked unconscious by his would-be wifey. That, furthermore, results in Gromit disguising Victor himself as the were-rabbit, which earns him a well-deserved beating from the townsfolk. It's unknown what happened to him from then on out, but hopefully he's learned a valuable lesson about respecting women, and not killing people too, I guess. Rumpelstiltskin from Shrek Forever After is up next. He's one of Shrek's more calculating adversaries from the series, using his magical contracts to make deals that essentially give him whatever he wants. Most notably, a deal to take one single day from Shrek's life results in a butterfly effect that ultimately ends in Rumpelstiltskin taking over the kingdom of Far, Far Away. Despite Rumpelstiltskin coming extremely close to achieving his goals, Shrek and Fiona's kiss of true love breaks the contract, and ultimately nothing is known of Rumpel's fate except for the fact that he's behind bars. Next we have another ambiguous fate, that of Miss Grunion from Mr. Peabody and Sherman. Her attempts to get Sherman out of the custody of a talking dog probably wouldn't result in a huge legal punishment, but she gets karma in a more unique way, getting involuntarily sucked up by a time rift and sent to a group of Trojan soldiers.
Come here, soldier.
She might technically have her freedom to some degree, but think about it, everything and everyone Grunion knows is now literally decades away from her, and she has no clear way to reunite with them. It's a pretty rough punishment, and it's only gonna get worse from here. There is no Easter Bunny, there is no Tooth Fairy, and there is no way we can place Titan from Megamind any lower. Just kidding, by the way, I met the Easter Bunny one time. He's chill. Titan could learn a thing or two from him, really.
I usually just scare criminals. You haven't been naughty, have you?
Perhaps the most iconic incel villain in cinematic history, Titan responds to his rejection by Roxanne in the worst possible way by using his powers to become a supervillain rather than a hero.
It's supposed to be with me!
Proving himself as a mentally unstable man-child, Titan ultimately gets defeated by Megamind, losing the powers he was having so much fun with and, ironically, being sent to the same prison Megamind himself was in. Still, despite him being in jail for what I can only imagine is several decades, if not life, he's still happy enough to dance with some pretty sick moves. Get it, Hal, you depraved man-child, you. Up next, we have Chantel Dubois from Madagascar 3, Europe's Most Wanted. This Monegasque animal control captain is known as the most dangerous exterminator in the country, and that's probably because her second favorite hobby, next to killing animals, is collecting. What does she collect, you may ask? Take a wild guess. In any case, her sadistic streak is stopped by the animals. After Mort shoots her with a tranquilizer dart, the others take the opportunity to trap her in a crate and ship her and her men to Madagascar. She's about to be in full-on survival mode, but at the very least, she has her allies with her, so while she'll be struggling, she won't be struggling alone. Unless they turn on her, that is, which, no, I didn't really think about that. From an animal hunter to an actual animal, Professor Marmalade is up next. Marmalade is a two-faced guinea pig who prided himself on being seen as the most altruistic creature in the known world. In actuality, he was a scheming villain who planned one of the most devious heists in history, raising millions of dollars to give to various charities, only to brainwash countless other guinea pigs to steal it just as it arrived. He's a truly messed up guy, which is why I can't say I feel bad for his end. In fact, it's probably one of the most satisfying endings on the whole list. His mansion, with all his possessions he took so much pride in, was blown up before his very eyes, and thanks to Diane's cleverness, he was framed for the theft of a jewel and presumably a bunch of other crimes too. Considering his big villain reveal was during his scheme to falsely accuse the bad guys of his own crimes, it's poetic that he got arrested for someone else's crimes rather than his own, not to mention completely losing all of his public favor. It's truly an unbearable punishment for him. Speaking of bears, next is Vincent from Over the Hedge. Honestly, the fact that Vincent even survived is nothing short of a miracle. With Hammy's help, Vincent is restrained and hit by the D-Pelter Turbo, a government-banned weapon that fires a laser strong enough to destroy a satellite in outer space.
The D-Pelter Turbo. Prepare for a lot of stinging.
He may have somehow survived that, but given how long the blast was, it's safe to say he endured a lot of pain, not to mention hair loss. We'd place him lower, but he was released into the Rockies after the events of the movie, which will give him a fresh start, and hopefully a valuable lesson about not bullying. Nearing the end of this section is a dual entry, Jack and Jill from Puss in Boots. They might have survived a stomp from the Great Terror, which admittedly is pretty darn lucky, but they were injured enough to be placed in full body casts, which means they'll be in pain and out of commission for a long while. And to think, now their little pig babies are gonna have to care for their own parents. Kids really are the ones who suffer the most in these situations. There is a case to be made that Zekel Khan didn't survive, even though we never saw him die. When he leads Cortez to a newly closed entrance to the City of Gold, Cortez assumes he was lying, and that furthermore results in, they never showed it.
You lying heathen. There's nothing here at all.
Well, knowing what we do about Cortez being a ruthless pirate and all, we can only assume that Zekel Khan was either murdered or enslaved by Cortez, neither of which sound like a very happy ending for him. Next is the newest Dreamworks villain, Vantra, from The Wild Robot. Usually the term crushed in a context like this lists would indicate a character dying instantly by something big falling on them. For Vantra, though, it's more of a soda can type of crushing. Using her own ship's tractor beam against her, Roz manages to get Vantra crushed by the forces of gravity itself.
We will just keep
Granted, Vantra is a robot, so it's not unreasonable to assume that she could be repaired or at least have her consciousness transferred over to something else. Another benefit of being a robot is the fact that she doesn't feel physical pain, which is great for her here. All she's going to have to deal with is the fact that she failed her mission, which, knowing what we humans tend to do with faulty technology, is probably still not going to end super well for her. It might seem strange to place Mrs. Tweedy from Chicken Run here in the non-lethal area of our list. While it may not be a sudden explosion, Tweedy had one of the most cartoonishly over-the-top deaths we've looked at so far. She smacks face first into a billboard, falls into a pot of presumably boiling gravy, and even gets crushed by a door from which we don't see her bounce back.
I told you they was organized.
If she did survive this, she's gonna have some serious burns and injuries that'll torment her for a while. And as of the sequel, Dawn of the Nugget, it's confirmed that she did, in fact, survive. Not only that, she remarried and started a new, even more ruthless chicken business, because that's possible, proving that she didn't learn anything adjacent to a lesson from the first movie. As a result, she got an even more cartoonish fake-out death, being shot with a robot duck's laser and once again being right at the center of a factory-wide explosion. Of course, the director confirmed that she did, in fact, survive, again, meaning that she had to deal with those severe, albeit deserved, near-fatal injuries twice. Rounding out the non-lethal fates is the Toad from Flushed Away. Despite a sympathetic backstory, the Toad loses any sympathy we would have had for him by engaging in an attempted genocide against all rats.
Perhaps you forget that it was a rat who cast me from paradise.
Oh, please, not the scrapbook again.
I guess we should be glad he didn't target humanity since they're the ones who flushed him in the first place. Thankfully, either way, his plan wasn't successful. Roddy managed to trick him into getting his tongue stuck in a spinning gear, leaving him stuck there for who knows how long. This leads to a situation where Toad has absolutely no hope of escape. While his cousin Le Frog managed to get away relatively unharmed, it's confirmed that the Toad was arrested for his crimes and an essential guide companion to the movie. Judging by the fact that his crimes were the attempted genocide of an entire species, I don't think he's gonna be seeing the light of day anytime soon. But the remaining villains saw a different kind of light, and they went towards it for better or for worse. These are the Quick Deaths. One of our few truly redeemed villains today, Humpty Alexander Dumpty, is next. While old Huevo here committed some pretty horrible crimes against his blood brother and his old town as a whole,
Okay, I got everything. We did it. Come on, let's go!
he ultimately managed to redeem himself by helping return the golden goose to its mother, the Great Terror. When Puss can only pull Humpty or the goose up, he refuses to let Humpty go, so Puss's old friend does what he does best and has a great fall.
Puss, you have to save the baby or the mama will destroy San Ricardo.
Jokes aside, it was actually a pretty sad scene, but he looks truly at peace in the end, and it was his own choice to die for the sake of others. He definitely did redeem himself in the end, so if anyone had a peaceful death here, I'm glad it was Humpty. Next is another villain who could find redemption, Tai Lung from Kung Fu Panda. Sent to the spirit realm by the infamous Wuxi Fingerhold, Tai Lung died with an expression of horror as he was finally forced to accept defeat at the hands of the true Dragon Warrior. It may not have been a particularly painful death, or at the very least not a super long one, but Tai Lung is going to spend eternity in the spirit realm stewing on his defeat. Still, in Kung Fu Panda 4, he seems to have found some sense of peace, even accepting Po as a Dragon Warrior and showing that he might have some capacity for redemption.
Maybe Oogway was right about you.
It seems like Tai Lung learned his lesson, giving him one of the easier to swallow ends in Dreamworks' villainous lineup. A much less deserved instantaneous death was that of Fairy Godmother from Shrek 2. When she needed a hero most, none showed up, except for Harold, who was a hero to his family. But the worst nightmare of Fairy Godmother, by reflecting her magic right back at her, Harold gave Fairy Godmother a truly gruesome fate, being turned into bubbles. Yeah, jokes aside, this really is one of the easier fatal endings for a Dreamworks villain. I guess if the bubbles could feel pain, that kinda changes it, seeing as how she'd be popping by multiple tiny explosions, but it seemed pretty instantaneous to me, so really, I can't honestly say she deserves to be any lower. General Mandible from Ants is up next. Hailing from Dreamworks' least kid-friendly film, you might expect General Mandible to have one of the more gruesome deaths on our list, but ironically, it was one of the most basic. The guy fell to his doom and died on impact.
I believe history will see things differently.
Unlike with Humpty, it wasn't his own decision to die, and there was nothing mistakable for peace on that face of his, unfortunately for him. Prince Charming is made it pretty low on our list, and that's because he's the first villain here to get crushed to death. This narcissistic nobleman came pretty close to his happy ending, plotting to kill Shrek for revenge in front of an audience of admirers.
A new era finally begins!
His plot to slay the ogre was foiled, however, when he was crushed by a stone tower. You know, the stone tower that was literally part of the set he made for his big show.
This was supposed to be my happily ever after!
If it's any consolation, Charming, it was a grand finale. You may have died, but at least you looked fabulous while doing it, right? Rounding out this category is the coldest death on our list, Dr. Zara from Abominable. Falling to your death or getting crushed to death are both pretty brutal concepts, even if they are instantaneous. But there are basically 3 ways to interpret this one. A, Zara died from being crushed by a massive pile of snow. Then there's option B, that she actually died from the fall itself, either of which would mean the last moments of her life were full of sheer horror. The worst, though, is C, that she survived the fall and the crushing due to her snowmobile's strong build, but honestly that would make this one even rougher. While it was probably an instant death, the thought that she could have starved or frozen to death is still pretty brutal. But ironically, it's the last entry before we get to the category for particularly gruesome ends, which we'll call the brutal deaths. First up is the wannabe alpha of the dragons, Drago Bloodfist. The villain of How to Train Your Dragon 2 is a great foil to Hiccup. Instead of adopting dragons as friends and steeds, Drago is a ruthless brute who plans to use their strength to conquer the world, undeniably one of DreamWorks' most dangerous villains.
You belong to me now.
While his death didn't occur on screen, Drago still came painfully close to achieving his goal, only for Toothless's power to override that of his own dragon, sending the both of them to the depths of the sea. While it's not entirely impossible that he could have escaped, to be dragged to his more than likely doom by the very creature who brought him near victory must have felt like a pretty painful loss. I mean, it was a deserved painful loss, but still. On a very similar note is the next dragon's villain, Grimmel the Grizzly. Like Drago, Grimmel got sent to his doom at the bottom of the sea. Unlike him, however, there's much less room for doubt that he died. If he didn't die from the impact, which is the more likely scenario given the height he fell from, he would have certainly drowned, being too injured to swim to safety. Tack on the sheer terror in his eyes and you have a pretty rough end. Next we have another villain who came close to his goals, Shen from Kung Fu Panda 2. When a prophecy foretold that Shen's end would come from a warrior of black and white, he did the only reasonable thing, murdering every panda in the world, becoming a genocidal war criminal and one of DreamWorks' most evil villains by a long shot.
Such sad, sad faces.
In a true twist of irony, Shen was crushed by the very cannon he was going to use to blow up Poe, and even if he'd survived that, the explosion of the fireworks right afterwards would finish the job for sure. On the topic of explosions, next is Jack Horner from Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. Jack Horner was a man who was evil and proud of it. His entire goal was to use the wishing star to take all the magic in the world for himself, and only himself. Which is why his death at the very same wishing star is a beautifully ironic twist.
Goodbye.
Despite coming pretty close to achieving his goal, he was knocked into the exploding wishing star and died wondering what specifically he did to deserve this.
Oh, what a good boy am I.
Knowing Jack, I'm sure he's blown up more than his fair share of people, so it makes sense that he'd wonder which event necessitated such a gruesome end. And we'll talk about just one more explosion for now, Galaxar from Monsters vs. Aliens. Getting stuck on a ship that's self-destructing is one of those fates where they really don't need to spell out whether or not the bad guy survived.
Nothing happened. Maybe my count...
Sure, being in the escape pod could have given Galaxar a sort of shield from the worst of it, but that actually just makes this even more gruesome. His death would have been prolonged even more if the escape pod's armor helped prevent injuries, or it could have intensified the heat and pressure from the explosion. Who knows? In any case, if getting blown up is the best case scenario, you've got a pretty brutal end to consider. Up next, we have the chef from Trolls. We've seen a lot of ironic deaths today, but the chef takes the cake of those. It's fitting that the villain whose whole goal was to eat a troll ended up getting eaten by a much bigger creature herself. Not only does getting digested sound like an absolutely horrific way to go, there's also the little detail that Creek, who was eaten by the same hill monster, somehow survived, seeing as how he's brought back in the Beast Goes On cartoon series. Being digested is bad enough, but imagine having to get digested and deal with the trauma of it afterwards. Still, at least she only got eaten once. That's more than we can say for one of DreamWorks' most iconic villains, Lord Farquaad.
The ogre has fallen in love with the princess. Oh, good lord.
When he makes the mistake of getting in between Shrek and Fiona's romance, he finds himself on the wrong side of a hungry dragon's belly. That's bad enough, not to mention the fact that he was quite literally moments away from becoming the king he wanted to be. But then you take Shrek 4D into account, where Farquaad's ghost seeks revenge on Shrek and a post-mortem marriage with Fiona.
Soon you and I will be together forever.
Ironically, he meets his end by once again getting eaten by a dragon. I didn't know that even cartoon logic allowed ghosts to be eaten, but I guess Pac-Man has some competition. Before we move into our final category, let's talk about a couple more explosions, like that of Kai from Kung Fu Panda 3. During his climactic final battle with Po, the latter decides the only way to destroy this chi-hungry madman is to give him exactly what he wants. All the chi that Po can harness, which proves to be far too much for Kai to handle.
No, it's too much! It's too much! No!
While plenty of characters today were brought painfully close to victory only to have it snatched right away, Kai literally got the power he was searching for, only for that same power to blow him up from the inside. There's only one explosion I can call worse, and that's the demise of Red Death from How to Train Your Dragon. He's more gray than red, isn't he? Well, whether he's red or not, he's definitely dead. Toothless hit him with a fireball to the throat, which blew up his body from the inside via a series of brutal explosions. With how massive Red Death was, those explosions must have taken a while to fully destroy him, but I doubt they hurt any less as a result. Now, believe it or not, Red Death is the last full-on death on our list. But believe you me, these last four are the ones with fates worse than Death, and I have a feeling they'll be jealous of Red Death pretty soon. She may be the least popular of the series' villains, but the Chameleon from Kung Fu Panda 4 got the most brutal ending by far. I guess technically the Chameleon kinda died, but rather than being sent right to the spirit realm like Tai Lung, blown up in the spirit realm like Kai, or even blown up plain and simple like Shen, the Chameleon was simply defeated by Po and Zhen. After that, she lost all the power she worked to obtain, which was apparently quite a lot of power. She ended up dragged kicking and screaming into the spirit realm by Tai Lung, surrounded by all the other masters whose power she used against Po.
Shen, do something!
While we don't see any more of her afterwards, I don't think Tai Lung has a welcome party ready for her. Or maybe he does, who am I to assume? The Bronze Medal of Brutality goes to Dave from the Penguins of Madagascar movie. After all the brutal things we've seen today, getting trapped in a snow globe probably sounds like a pretty light punishment. What? But even if we ignore how close Dave came to victory, his fate of being shrunken down and trapped in a snow globe means that he not only stays in a cramped space for as long as the globe stands, he experiences straight up earthquakes whenever his child owner shakes him. We would place him lower, but it's entirely possible that the kid could drop the snow globe by accident, which would result in Dave being free again.
Burning thirst for revenge!
But with how tiny he is now, I doubt he'll be much trouble regardless. It's time for us to let our viewers go. To the Silver Medal of Brutality, King Ramesses II. The Prince of Egypt is one of Dreamworks' first films, and arguably one of its best, acting as a beautiful retelling of the biblical story of the Exodus. This includes the defeat of the Pharaoh at the hands of the 10 plagues sent by God through his brother. All these plagues were pretty rough, but the worst was definitely the 10th and final one, during which Ramesses lost his son, forced to grapple with the fact that his pride resulted in the death of his beloved child.
Leave me!
As if that weren't harrowing enough, he makes a last-ditch effort to come out on top by sending his army after Moses, which resulted in the parted Red Sea crashing down on them, drowning all the Pharaoh's army in the process. Ramesses lost quite literally everything that mattered to him, forced to sit on his lonesome throne forever, knowing that his brother is gone, his son is dead, and his army was crushed by his own word. It's hard to think of a worse way to go. But at the very least, Ramesses' suffering at least ended at some point. Pitch Black from Rise of the Guardians earns our top spot for that sole reason. It's fitting that the monster who wanted to plunge the world into eternal darkness and terror ended up with the exact fate he'd hoped to force onto others. At his defeat, Pitch Black is dragged away by pure nightmares, and while he assures the Guardians that he'll be back, something about his hopeless, terrified screams tells me that that's more than a little bit unlikely.
Finally! Someone who knows how to have a little fun.
Pitch Black basically got sentenced to psychological hell with little to no hope of escaping, and with him being immortal, there's no way his suffering will end any way you slice it. He failed at his goal, he's tormented by his fears, and he can't even beg for the sweet release of death to overcome it. Man, this guy is really in the same category as a jealous purple octopus. Let that sink in.